In this video, we're going to show you how to install the steering rack bellows boot on your INFINITI G37 X, located behind your front wheels. Using a 21mm socket, loosen and remove your lug nuts. Now on our particular vehicle, we have a locking lug nut. We have the key to remove it. If you just have a standard lug nut, go ahead and take it off. Once you have those removed, remove the wheel and set it aside. In order to make this job easier, we're going to go ahead and push the ignition button here, and that's going to release our steering wheel lock. That way we can go ahead and manipulate the steering so we have better access to our components. In order to remove our tie rod end here, we need to remove our cotter pin on the top. So we could simply use a pair of cutters here or pliers, and we want to bend out the tabs on the back side. Try and straighten them out as much as possible. And then we want to grab the head of it and see if we can work this out. There we go. We're able to pull out that cotter pin. You do not want to reuse this, so make sure you get a replacement cotter pin. We want to go ahead and loosen the nut on our outer tie rod here. We're going to use an 18mm socket on our ratchet and just break this free. If you want to, go ahead and spray this down with some rust penetrant, and then we can put our power tool on it and remove it. Sometimes it's beneficial to go ahead and work this nut back and forth to go ahead and get that to loosen up nice and easy. Let's go ahead and throw that nut back on there, just a few threads. Give that a wipe down. Now at this point here, we're going to go ahead and gently tap this here to pop the ball joint out of the knuckle. Now we want to keep the nut on here. The next step we want to do is, if you follow this down, there is a jam nut right here. This is a locking nut. We now want to go ahead and loosen this. Now our jam nut is going to come loose using our 22mm wrench. Now we did spray this down with some rust penetrant. So our jam nut is loose from our outer tie rod, but it's spinning our inner tie rod. So we want to hold on to that with a wrench and loosen these up. There it is. All right, we can now spin that nut freely by hand, so that's good. Now that we have the jam nut loose, we now want to go ahead and unthread our outer tie rod. And what we're going to do is, when we unthread this, we're going to count the amount of revolutions it takes for our ball joint here. From position at 12 o'clock, we're going to unthread it and count the amount of turns it takes to unthread it off of the inner tie rod. When we install the component, we're going to spin it on the same amount of revolutions it took to take it off. Is roughly 14 revolutions for our particular vehicle. Yours might be slightly different. Now once you get that count, go ahead and grab a crayon or a marker and you can write it somewhere, maybe in the wheel well or something. I'm gonna write up inside the fender liner here or fender well. Now this here will just come off as you drive the vehicle. It's not gonna damage the vehicle in any way, but there, we won't forget it. On our bellows boot right here, we have an outer clamp. You can simply use a pair of pliers to pinch these tabs, expand that. Go ahead and spin this jam nut off. When we take that off, we'll take the clamp off at the same time. Now on the inboard portion of this boot, right here, you may have a wire tie type of anchor like this here, or you might have a plastic tie, something to that effect. You simply need to remove it. We're gonna go ahead and grab this here and just cut it. None of the clamps that support this are reusable. So in our case here, we simply cut it off. Our next step, go ahead and grab that boot, give it a little twist, and then pull it out towards you. Slide that off. Now right here we have our steering rack shaft that goes in and out of the steering rack assembly itself. Now you want to carefully inspect on the inside here. You can see I'm simply wiping out some grease, and that's okay. We're going to put that back in there. Now for any reason, if you have power steering fluid leaking out of here, that is a bad thing. You want to go ahead and either have the steering rack replaced or serviced to fix that and stop that from leaking. Ours still has some grease in there and we're in good shape. We can take our boot here. I'm going to slide this over. Now in this instance here, it's going to be easier if we simply go to the other side of the vehicle. We're going to go ahead and grab that wheel and we're going to rotate it. And that's going to bring our steering shaft into the steering rack. That's going to make it easier for us to go ahead and line this up and pop that onto the rack itself. Once we have that onto the rack, let's go ahead and install our wire tie. Now that we have that onto the rack, let's go ahead and install our tie strap here. I'm going to go ahead and get that started. Slide that back. And I'm going to put it right on the inboard portion here. Go ahead and grab your pliers. We do want to make sure that's good and snug on that. Use your cutters, and we're going to cut off the excess. Go ahead and take your outer clamp, slide that up and over. Well, folks, it seems like our outer end here is a little bit thicker than the original. So we're going to try and slide that boot out, get this on there. There it is. And we'll slide that back and in and release that clamp. That is nice and secure now. We're going to install our jam nut. We'll rotate this back and extend that shaft out to the wheel. Take your tie rod in and we're going to start to thread that on. Now at this point here, we have a total of 14 revolutions to get this back up to where we can basically have a preliminary alignment setting. I'm going to go ahead and run that jam nut down just a little bit. Now we had a total of 14 revolutions to go ahead and get that set up. Line up our ball joint here with our knuckle. I'm going to slide that up into position. Get our nut started here. Now here we have a castle nut, and it's called that because it's shaped like the top of a castle with the notches in it. In the ball joint stud there is a hole. So when we go to tighten this down and we torque it, we want to make sure that the hole in our ball joint stud lines up with one of the notches in our castle notch here. Then we'll tighten down the tie rod nut here, and then we're going to torque this down to 33 foot-pounds. Install our cotter pin. Now you can do this a couple different ways. You can bend the tab up and over, or you can wrap it around the side. It really doesn't matter. What I like to do is go up and over. I'll take the upper tab, bend that, and fold it over. And I'll use my cutters to cut just on the opposite side of the stud to cut off the excess. And then on the bottom, I'll come flush with the nut and I'll cut that off. Make sure you're wearing safeties. And this is all secured. Next, your jam nut here needs to be torqued to 65 foot-pounds. If you have the ability to do so, go ahead and do that now. We're going to go ahead and make ours pretty tight. Once your jam nut is secured and torqued, you can see from us torquing that tie rod, it kind of twisted. Simply grab a pair of pliers, rotate that so it's more of a flush, even setting here, or level per se. Now at this point here, you can go ahead and install your wheel, bring the vehicle down and get your alignment performed. That's going to help prevent abnormal tire wear and component wear at this point. You're all set. Go ahead and install your wheel. I'm going to go ahead and get all of our lug nuts started by hand. Once we get all of these started, we're going to go ahead and snug them down. We have our locking key. Go ahead and torque down your lug nuts to 80 foot-pounds. We're going to use our locking key first. Then we'll continue with the rest in a crisscross pattern. And you're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.